Hello. Figured I would, since I am around, and some people might pop in around 7, figured I would, pop back up. So we have our quiz review video that's available. And now here I am to answer questions. Q&A. That's what we got here. I was getting my microphone ready. Did a little session earlier because I was worried that I might be a little wiped at 7. So I figured at least I'd have a video up. But here I am. So, questions. What kind of questions you got on this official YouTube live stream evolution quiz review Q&A? Brought to you by Shakey's. For the greatest in artery clogging goodness, think Shakey's. Ah, pups. Pups are little babies. Basically, you have to think based on who would survive the best. Crud, I think I have to pull up the pups again. But based on who would survive the best, you have to assign a certain number of pups. So, for instance, the mouse that you feel survives the worst, based on that data, maybe you give them 0 pups. The mouse that survives the second or third worst, maybe you give them 1 pup. See what I'm saying there? So you gotta use a, excuse me, little hiccup. You gotta use the data to determine which pup you think is the right pup. Number of pups. I don't have the specific honors quiz review sheet, so feel free to ask me specific questions and I'll answer them here. Hey, that's my dog. What's up, dog? Everybody just went, no, Mr. H, no. Don't do that. Come right over here, you. Hey, thanks for walking on the keyboard there, Calvin. Really appreciate it. You're a real scholar. Alright, so specific questions. Which one is 12? Because I have a slight variation on your particular review sheet. Oh, okay. So somebody says, well, evolution's just a theory, implying that it's nothing more than a guess. Then what they're saying is that there's not really evidence to support it. Now, in common verbiage, common colloquialism, we people tend to talk about theories as ideas. When a lot of people say theory, that's what the person means, is they mean, hey, an idea. But a scientific theory is not what we're usually referring to when we speak normally about theories. A scientific theory is something completely different. It's a very well-defined term that you have to have a ton of tested, verified evidence and facts in order to qualify as a scientific theory. The reason why a theory would not be a law is not because it's not factual. It's not because it's not true. It's because there are little pieces of the theory that still might need to be explained. For example, how did the literal first ever living thing come to exist? How did that first ever living thing evolve? The only way we can know that for sure is if we can create a living thing using non-living materials, which is not something we are able to do. So that particular idea is still up in the air, for example. In the past, the question of how did whales evolve from land animals? That used to be a major point of contention, a question that was unanswered, a loose string in the theory. But obviously we watched that video and we've seen the evidence and whatnot, so we ended up finding that piece of the evolutionary puzzle. So that's what the difference is. That's why it's not just an idea. That's why it's factual, and tons of supporting evidence, has to be well tested. Hey, who do you think you're barking at? This one's a little noisy, Mr. Calvin. And he's got a stomach issue that he has to eat frequently throughout the day. Calvin, come over here, you. He has to eat frequently throughout the day because otherwise he produces excess bile and then he ends up puking. So half the time he's, like, I just fed him, but then he turns and he barks at the food, and it's like, well, you just got fed. How much can you possibly be eating in one sitting? You're going to get to be a little chubba. You're going to be a little chubba, Calvin. Any more questions? Come here, Calvin. Come here. He's positioning himself to go bark. But I've got Benny, like, on me at the moment, so I can't, like, get up. Come here, Calvin. Good boy. Good boy. Come here. Come here. Yeah. I'm waiting. Give me a question. And feel free to check out the video, too, that I posted before. I went more in depth into the pup question and more in depth into a couple other specific questions. So even if you don't have that question now, maybe seeing me go over it in depth might help you a little bit. Oh, okay. 3 types of structures: homologous, vestigial, and Calvinologous. Alright, watch out, Benny. Let me take care of this pip. Ugh. So, homologous is, well, first of all, one of the key things about those structures is whether or not there's a common ancestor. So vestigial structures and homologous structures are structures that are from a common ancestor. Vestigial structures, like a set of leg bones in a whale or a tailbone on a human, have no function. Whales can't use legs. Not even the ancient whales, because they were massive and the legs would have collapsed on land and just broken, shattered bones all over the place. So common ancestor, it shows evidence of that common ancestor. It shows evidence, for instance, in this case, that whales were coming from land animals. but it just doesn't have a function anymore. That trait is slowly going away. Snakes have hip bones. They have hips, but you know, they don't have legs. So the hip bones are just a remnant, a vestige, showing that they evolved from an organism that had legs. Probably some four-legged lizard-like creature. Homologous structures. Those are structures that are similar to each other, might even have a similar function, and they're also from a common ancestor. If you look at the layout of our arm, fingers at one end, wrist bones, forearm bones, and then the one big shoulder connecting bone. That same exact structure, that same exact template, is seen in all sorts of other mammals. Bats, cats, whales. So that overall template of finger bone, wrist bone, forearm bone, that template is homologous for us. Well, not the whale, because the whale's vestigial, because it doesn't use well, actually, you know what, I shouldn't say that, because the whale, those bones might provide some support. So even if they're not useful in the way that we would deem necessary, I have to look that up if they're technically considered vestigial, the finger bones and whatnot, or if they provide some kind of support. The cats, though, that's a good example right there. The bat, it's a good example right there of homologous. It's from a common ancestor and similar structure, similar function, usually. And then analogous is a similar structure, like flies have wings, so do bats, so do birds, but they all evolved wings on their own separate evolutionary journey. So they're not traits from a common ancestor. So that's analogous. Howard Darwin, basically, it's broken down. Calvin and Benny are play fighting now. Back up, you two. Settle down. But essentially 3 steps. First is there's got to be some kind of change, either an environmental change or Benny, stop it. All right, come here. Normally, I let you play fight. What? Right now, I'm busy. All right. Separated the boys. Yeah, so some type of change, genetic change, which could lead to a brand new trait or a brand new variation of a trait, or an environmental change, which starts to select for a variation that otherwise is not surviving well. Then there's got to be a competitive advantage now for that new trait or that different variation. And as a result of that advantage, it starts reproducing more, and it comes to eventually dominate the population. So that's how you could go from a trait that didn't even exist, or a trait that was on the fringes of survival, to that trait becoming the dominant variation. That's how it happens. Genetic change or environmental change, some type of competitive advantage, and then the population with that trait grows and grows and grows, outcompetes the old one, and there you go. And you have to probably be able to apply that to something specific. Come up with an adaptation, for example, like sharp teeth, and construct a little 3-step story specifically referring to sharp teeth. What advantage may they have provided, under what conditions, and that kind of bit. Artificial selection. Whereas natural is based on the environment. If you have the best trait in the environment, you're going to survive best. Artificial is just humans randomly picking traits that we decide we want organisms to have. So like dog breeding. Dog breeding is an example. Horse breeding. Take race horses. Only the fastest horses are allowed to breed. People pay tens of thousands of dollars just for the privilege of having the faster horse impregnate their horse. So that's an example. Artificial selection. I feel used, Pat Star. It's just like, yeah, answer my questions. Oh, that's all I needed. I'm leaving now. Man, at least I got a thank you, I guess. You gotta throw money at the screen. I have to shop at Devolver Digital. They have this machine coming out that'll allow you to just throw cash at the screen. And then EA will use it so that if you want to do a basic punch in your next fighting game, then you throw $1 at the screen. It causes your player to punch. And you'll get a real sense of pride and accomplishment from it. $5 lets you do a special move, by the way. Donate my Patreon. Like, subscribe, favorite. Alrighty. So, anything else? I'm going to leave this up and start grading a little bit. The bacterial relation. Crud, I don't remember. Oh, I think I might know what that is. I think that's basically how do how do animals, plants, behavior all relate? Basically, I think that's basically the gist of the question. The biggest piece of evidence for that is DNA, genes. Because no matter what kind of living thing you are, you have some kind of genetic information that leads to amino acids, which leads to proteins, which then go and perform all the different jobs that the organism needs to perform. In fact, what I really wanted to look up, and I forgot to do it early this morning, is the names of proteins found in all kinds of living things. Oh wow, so I just looked it up. All species in all 3 domains share 23 universal proteins. Of course, the protein's DNA sequences, those A, T's, C's, and G's, differ slightly. According to NCBI, there are 324 proteins common to all life forms. Huh. So 2 different answers there. But the key is that, and there's the word homologous in one person's answer. So the key is that because we all have DNA, that DNA then leads to amino acids, which leads to proteins. So we all share tons of similarities through our genes and through our amino acid sequences and through our proteins. And you guys are literally working on the amino acid part of this right now in periods 1 and 3. So you're getting to see that. There's one protein called ubiquitin. That one is one of the ones that I think is found in pretty much every organism. So you would look at protein and you say, oh look, there's that protein ubiquitin, and bacteria makes it. Oh hey, look at the plant, it makes ubiquitin. Oh, look at the human. So we all have that in common. That's a big piece of evidence for evolution right there. If you go back far enough, there was an organism that had those proteins, passed them to us. Multiple choice mostly. This is a easier quiz. We have a second evolution quiz in like 2 or 3 weeks. That one's a little bit harder. And then we have a test. I don't know if you could hear Calvin attacking his dolphin chew toy. You're very welcome. Study well. Kick that quiz's butt. And if there are no further questions, then I'm out of here. But of course, no problem. Feel like a customer service representative. Have I answered all your questions today? Good night. Take it easy.